Okay, continuing. Therefore, the United States is obliged to exercise its maximum influence in its polite expression or pressure to bring about more pluralistic institutions where they do not exist.
More pluralistic institutions where they don't exist.
Yes.
That means those in Asia to get together against China. To bring about
More pluralistic
What else does that mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Well, or pressure China to bring about more pluralistic
The
institutions.
United States should bring about more pluralism.
No. Therefore, the United States is obliged to exercise its maximum influence in its polite expression or pressure to bring about more pluralistic institutions where they do not exist. So the United States would be fostering these pluralistic institutions.
That's right.
Okay.
Continue.
And especially in countries capable of threatening American security.
Okay.
In these conceptions, regime change is the ultimate goal of American foreign policy in dealing with non-democratic societies. Peace with China is less a matter of strategy than of change in Chinese governance. Nor is
Read that sentence again. Change.
In these conceptions,
Yeah.
regime change is the ultimate goal of American foreign policy in dealing with non-democratic societies.
Like China. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Peace with China is less a matter of strategy than of change in Chinese governance.
I'm sorry. Read it again. I wasn't thinking. Change is strategy. Read that again.
In these conceptions,
Yeah.
regime change is the ultimate goal of American foreign policy in dealing with non-democratic societies.
Yeah.
Peace with China is less a matter of strategy than of change in Chinese governance.
I don't understand. Repeat it again, slowly. Peace with China. No.
Peace with China
Yeah.
is less a matter of strategy.
It's not a question of strategy, because in the last in the last condition you must have a war. You must have difficulty.
Well, or you must have a change in Chinese governance.
Or, yeah.
Peace with China is less a matter of strategy than of change in Chinese governance, which the U.S. would.
So peace with China is less this and that.
Yeah.
So that along those lines, the United States must try to have a change in the regime.
Well, he says that that's what we do.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, it is obliged to exercise its maximum influence.
Obliged, yeah.
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 Nor is the analysis interpreting international affairs as an unavoidable struggle for strategic preeminence confined to Western strategists. Chinese triumphalists apply almost identical reasoning. The principal difference is that their perspective is that of the rising power, while Crow represented the United Kingdom, defending its patrimony as a status quo country.
Yeah.
An example of this genre is Colonel Liu Mingfu's China Dream, discussed in Chapter 18. In Liu's view, no matter...
Who's he?
I think he's the head of the Chinese military, actually.
Liu?
Yeah.
How do you spell it?
Liu-Mingfu.
Yes. Okay. It is you.
In Liu's view, no matter how much China commits itself to a, quote, peaceful rise, conflict is inherent in U.S.-China relations.
There you are. Yeah.
The relationship between China and the United States will be a, quote, marathon contest and the, quote, duel of the century.
Yeah.
Moreover, the competition is essentially zero-sum. The alternative to total success...
You know what that means? If one gains, the other loses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only alternative to total success is humiliating failure. Quote, if China in the 21st century cannot become world number one, cannot become the top power, then inevitably it will become a straggler that is cast aside. Note 9.
Mm-hmm.
Neither the American version of the Crow Memorandum nor the more triumphalist Chinese
Now,
analysis...
what does it mean? Who's analyzing America? What do you mean by that sentence? Neither the analysis, America analysis Crow. Is that he? Who in America is examining it?
I think what he's been saying is that America is taking the same position that Crow did in relation to the rise of Germany,
That's what he's saying, yeah.
where China is the new Germany.
Certainly not Obama.
Not explicitly,
No. So he's
but overall policy, I would,
At least the Pentagon.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Neither the American version of the Crow Memorandum nor the more triumphalist Chinese analyses have been endorsed by either government,
There you are.
but they provide a subtext of much current thought. If the assumptions of these views were applied by either side, and it would take only one side to make it unavoidable, China and the United States could easily fall into the kind of escalating tension described earlier in this epilogue. China would try to push American power as far away from its borders as it could, circumscribe the scope of American naval power, and reduce America's weight in international diplomacy. The United States would try to organize China's many neighbors into a counterweight to Chinese dominance.
That's it.
There you
There's
go.
The pluralism.
Yep.
Yeah.
Both sides would emphasize their ideological differences. The interaction would be even more complicated because the notions of deterrence and preemption are not symmetrical between these two sides. The United States is more focused on overwhelming military power, China on decisive psychological impact. Sooner or later, one side or the other would miscalculate. Once such a pattern has congealed, it becomes increasingly difficult to overcome. The competing camps achieve identity by their definition of themselves. The essence of what Crow described and the Chinese triumphalists and some American neoconservatives embrace is its seeming automaticity. Once the pattern was created and the alliances were formed, no escape was possible from its self-imposed requirements, especially not from its internal assumptions.
So you know what he's getting at. What he's saying is he has saved this by going to China. That's what must be coming. Go ahead. That's why he's setting up, I think he's setting up a straw man historically to show that he has prevented this from happening. Go ahead. Probably. Go ahead.
The reader of the Crow Memorandum cannot fail to notice that the specific examples of mutual hostility being cited were relatively trivial compared to the conclusions drawn from them.
Yeah.
Incidents of colonial rivalry in southern Africa, disputes about the conduct of civil servants. It was not what either side had already done that drove the rivalry. It was what it might do. Events had turned into symbols. Symbols developed their own momentum. There was nothing left to settle because the system of alliances confronting each other had no margin of adjustment. That must not happen in the relations of the United States and China insofar as American policy can prevent it.
There you are. Go ahead.
Of course, were Chinese policy to insist on playing by Crow Memorandum rules, the United States would be bound to resist. It would be an unfortunate outcome. I have described the possible evolution at such length to show that I am aware of the realistic obstacles to the cooperative U.S.-China relationship I consider essential to global stability and peace. A Cold War between the two countries would arrest progress for a generation on both sides of the Pacific. It would spread disputes into internal politics of every region at a time when global issues such as nuclear proliferation, the environment, energy security, and climate change impose global cooperation. Historical parallels are by nature inexact, and even the most precise analogy does not oblige the present generation to repeat the mistakes of its predecessors. After all, the outcome was a disaster for all involved, victors as well as defeated. Care must be taken lest both sides analyze themselves into self-fulfilling prophecies. This will not be an easy task. For, as the Crow Memorandum has shown, mere reassurances will not arrest the underlying dynamism. For were any nation determined to achieve dominance, would it not be offering assurances of peaceful intent? A serious joint effort involving the continuous attention of top leaders is needed to develop a sense of genuine strategic trust and cooperation. relations between China and the United States need not and should not become a zero-sum game. For the pre-World War I European leader, the challenge was that a gain for one side spelled a loss for the other, and compromise ran counter to an aroused public opinion. This is not the situation in the Sino-American relationship. Key issues on the international front are global in nature. Consensus may prove difficult, but confrontation on these issues is self-defeating. Nor is the internal revolution of the principal players comparable to the situation before World War I. When China's rise is projected, it is assumed that the extraordinary thrust of the last decades will be projected into the indefinite future and that the relative stagnation of America is fated. But no issue preoccupies Chinese leaders more than the preservation of national unity. It permeates the frequently proclaimed goal of social harmony, which is difficult in a country where its coastal regions are on the level of the advanced societies, but whose interior contains some of the world's most backward areas. The Chinese national leadership has put forward to its people a catalog of tasks to be accomplished. These include combating corruption, which President Hu Jintao has called an, quote, unprecedentedly grim task, and in the fight against which Hu...
Please jot down China corruption, the difficulties facing China corruption.
Let's see here, page 523.
This we have corruption, aging, 100 million people moving to the cities with corruption.
Combating corruption.
Yeah, okay.
What do they call it? Unprecedentedly
Okay. I know the other.
grim task.
All right.
And in the fight against which Hu has been involved at various stages of his career. Note 10. They involve as well a, quote, Western development campaign designed to lift up poor inland provinces, among them the three in which Hu once lived. Key proclaimed tasks also include establishing additional ties between the leadership and the peasantry, including fostering village-level democratic elections and enhanced transparency of the political process as China evolves into an urbanized society. In his December 2010 article, discussed in Chapter 18, Dai Bingguo outlined the scope of China's domestic challenge. Quote, according to the United Nations living standard of $1 per day, China still has 150 million people living below the poverty line. Even based on the poverty...
Okay, I didn't know that. 150 million people. Living below the poverty line.
Below $1 a day.
Living on below $1 a day?
Below $1 a day. That's, I guess, the
Yeah.